Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the weekly Q&A with Mark Bradley, where we get to pick Mark's brain for an hour. My name is Benji. I am new to the LeanScaper team. Could not be more excited to be here. Could not be happier to have the 54 of you and counting that are here now. Mark, are you ready to dive into some questions?
Yeah, all set.
All right. So this is a question from Star True. If you had to grow a design build company from 1 million to 10 million in 3 years, what does your exact playbook look like?
Wow, that's a question.
That's a hot start.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I'll jump right in. So number one, if you want to do design build, you have to have incredible designers. Now, either on staff or partners. If you want to grow a $10 million business, you have to have incredible designers. I really truly think that most companies want to grow to 10 million, but they forget that they need to be the best in their market in order to grow to 10 million. So quite often I come across people who ask me why they're not getting bigger projects. And the first thing I do is I say, can I see your website? When I get to the website, I see small projects or half finished projects with photos of projects that still have gravel in the garden beds and no plants and not professional photography. And I immediately have to tell them, listen, you don't look like a $10 million business online, so you're not going to become one. So first off, you got to look the part. And it's okay to use stock photos, and it's okay to build a website that you need to grow into. In other words, maybe your website looks like a little bit more advanced than your company portfolio does today. That's okay. I think that's a great place to start. Look like the company you want to become. So that's step one. Now, step two, we have to have the relationships that are going to serve us the leads. Yes, we can build a great website and we can hire a fantastic designer or work with a third-party designer. That gets us in the game. But, we have to actually drive demand. And demand for luxury services, I don't think really comes from Google ads. Sure, Google helps when we search. We want to come up quick on organic and we want lots of reviews and we want lots of organic search results. That generally does come from being out there using some paid to start to get more traffic originally. But your prime partnerships really are what dictate growth from a million to 10 million. You need to create partnerships with luxury real estate agents, with luxury home builders, with architects and designers that service that type of work, whether it's building architects or landscape architects. I think other trades that work with these types of properties are another great place to go. But ultimately, I need to create a partnership playbook that gets me more of those kind of leads coming very consistently, because we can't really count on referrals or marketing tactics to get that business as consistently. Now, I'm not saying not to do those things. Direct mail, Google ads, Facebook and Instagram ads definitely all play a part of creating a luxury image or creating an image of a $10 million design build firm. But it can't just happen with that. We have to get those relationships, and then we have to make sure that we're working those relationships to get a steady stream of the right type of leads. It makes it much easier. 3 to 5 really good partnerships can easily bring $10 million worth of revenue. So that's how I would get the business. I want to look the part. I want to be able to actually perform really good design work. And then I want partners that bring me the business. Now, there's so much more to this. You actually have to be the best. And this is what most businesses, I think, really lack, is training. In order to actually be the market leader and to be the best, you have to be able to do the work better than everybody else. And you have to be able to do it more efficient than everybody else so that you can compete on price you can compete on quality, and you can compete on your brand awareness. When you are the best and your customers tell you you're the best and you're building the best employees, then you become a market leader. And $10 million design build businesses are generally market leaders. So investing in skills training, investing in waste elimination, actually using an operating system like LeanScaper, where everybody in the company starts to recognize what good looks like using scorecards to track key metrics. All of these things kind of come together and create a market leader. I know that was a really long-winded answer, but that was a huge question.
It's a loaded question, so I think a longer answer is warranted. Mark, this is a question from Nathan. I think this is to do more with his maintenance crews. He's asking, do your crews do everything? Do they mow, trim, spray, irrigate, or do you have separate crews for each job? This would be more stops and fuel, but it's a much simpler approach.
It really does depend on the scale of your business. So I get this question a lot. What's the perfect crew size? How many special teams are there in the business? This is all really dictated by the size of your company. It's really hard to answer this question not knowing how big your company is or exactly what your service mix is. But I'll say this, whenever we're trying to design a product or a service, we're trying to find a way to make it profitable by design, which means every time we go do that work, we consistently make 15 or 20% profit. Now, if we're going to go and do more trips, it's generally going to cost more money because there's road time and downtime from stop to stop. So where possible, we want to create a more streamlined operation so that one crew can generate more revenue per stop or per service. And what we want to do is increase the amount of revenue that we produce and minimize the amount of unbilled time that we're producing. So yes, in some cases, we may want our fine gardening crew to go out and do grass cutting, garden bed maintenance, and maybe potentially do some organic pest control while on the site, for example. Or other times, maybe we want them to do a fertilizer application while they're on their routes. We want to do as much of that as possible without really slowing them down. And of course, then on more complex work, like crews that do design build installations, maybe we have a crew that's really quick and efficient and has the best quality at doing woodworking. Then we have another that is doing stonemasonry, where it's a lot of wet laid work with natural stone. But then maybe we have another crew that's really good at doing hardscape work with precast pavers and modular retaining walls. And so we start to create special teams based on the skills that are needed in each area. And it becomes much easier to create standard operating procedures, the right tooling, the right trailer setups, the right training program, so that we don't have to create these teams that are experts at everything. It just takes much longer to train and ramp people. And it's also much harder to give them the right equipment for the job. And then, of course, create recognizable production rates that they kind of work to on a day-to-day basis if they're always doing different work. So we want to simplify as much as possible, but we can't always do that as quickly as we'd like based on where the company is at in terms of scale. As the company grows, more special teams emerge, which makes it easier to train, ramp, and scale each of these special teams, which allows us to scale a little bit faster. In any case, I'd highly recommend that you have an apprenticeship program for every major skill or role in the business.
Well said. We have a really thoughtful question here from Jeremiah. Mark, I have a newly hired salesperson looking to grow his network in our company and industry referral partners. How should I go about building a budget for new relationship building? For example, real estate agent lunch and learns, golf outings, business professional networking sessions. I think overarchingly, Mark, this is a question about budgeting for kind of business development activities for this new salesperson. There's a question from Jeremiah.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's really important for newer salespeople to do a little bit more entertaining and a little bit more outbound selling, which does require a little bit more budget. And so generally speaking, if it's residential, what I've seen is taking part in, a private golf club in the area is always really good. Local business groups could be like your local chamber of commerce in your area. Definitely spending more time with real estate agents, builders, other trades is key. Now, what does that all cost? If you're going to give somebody a target of taking somebody out to lunch 2 days a week, year round, if they're in a sales position, purely to create new partnerships, or to curate and nurture existing partnerships, you've got to put a budget on that. And so maybe the budget is $100 a week or $200 a week, or maybe it's $500 a week. But we want to give a salesperson a fair chance by giving them an entertainment budget that kind of matches the KPIs that we've set out. And I think there are leading indicators for success in building partnerships. And ideally, you should be setting aside 2 lunch and learns a week. And those can be super casual at Starbucks, could be a little bit more formal at their office or at yours. But ultimately, I think if 2 days a week you're spending time with your partners or creating new partnerships, you're probably doing enough as a salesperson. And again, if you've got 1 person, 2, 3, 5, or 10 salespeople, if they're all out doing this, they're building enough pipeline and really good, strong organic pipeline that's likely to convert at a high rate with much higher margins than cold leads that you might be gathering off of Google or other paid ad attempts.
Mark, I'm just going to tack on a really quick kind of probing question to what you just said. Are you, in your kind of philosophy on this, are you deeply concerned about tracking and ROI, and hey, is this money I'm spending on lunches and golf games translating into business results? do you care a lot about that, and is there a way to track it, or is it a little bit more kind of like an intuitive feel thing? All activity is good activity, and I don't really care as long as my salespeople are out meeting and greeting and shaking hands.
Yeah, I think you just hit the nail there on the head. We want to know how it's working, and so what we're actually looking at is, for every salesperson, we're looking at the pipeline that they're developing. So one of the things that I really like to manage salespeople to is their pipeline activity. So if I'm trying to get a design build salesperson to go out and sell $6 million worth of business, and I know that we typically have, let's say, even a 50% close rate, then I know that we need to take and create $12 million worth of opportunity in the pipeline. So what I'm actually doing is looking at their budget. And let's say I've created an annual budget of $20,000 for entertainment for this salesperson. I'm looking at that $20,000 as a cost to go and get $12 million worth of pipeline so that I can close $6 million worth of business. And so that gives me a cost of acquisition from that partnership motion. Now, of course, I've also got time invested in the salesperson and the cost of them, and maybe estimators and designers. So it's not a straight one-to-one, but I know that spending $20,000 a year to really nurture my relationships and create new ones that are going to yield $6 million a year of business is a healthy decision. And so what I'm actually doing to create that number is I'm looking at my total revenue plan for the year, and then I'm creating a marketing budget that is a percentage of revenue. And generally speaking, I think 1 to 2% for companies that are not really in heavy growth mode is acceptable. But I think it's probably 2 to 4%, maybe even as much as 5% for overall marketing budget when I'm really trying to hyperscale the business. So if I'm going from 3 to 10 million, I'll probably crank my marketing budget up so that I've got better website, a better automated marketing system with outbound email, outbound text. I'm going to be using some paid social, some paid digital. I'm going to be spending a lot of money on partnership nurturing. I'm going to be taking builders to hockey games, and I'm going to be taking architects out for lunch, and I'm going to be going and working with luxury real estate agents and explaining how we can do staging and how we can create concept drawings for their listings. And I'm going to be spending that 3 to 5% everywhere in the business. But ultimately, I'm going to make sure that I've got adequate budget set aside for each salesperson to go and build and nurture those relationships. And yes, playing golf may sound like you're not working, but the reality is if they're on the right golf course with the right people and we're seeing business come away from those relationships, then we know that the cost of acquisition of that revenue is actually viable. And so that's why it's so important that we track in the CRM as leads are coming in, we track where they're coming from. And if they're coming through a partnership channel, we want to track that so that we can look and see just how effective our partnerships are. For me, it only took 5 to 7 relationships to do 50 million a year in sales, because those 5 to 7 were giving me so much repetitive business. And it wasn't all for them. Often it was architects who had multiple customers, but the architect is ultimately the partner, and they're bringing me all of their customers so that my business grows as a byproduct. So the cost of acquisition is not easy, but it's possible when you put the source of every lead into your CRM.
We have a question from Daryl, and there's a few people in replies who have chimed in and said, yeah, I'm in the same boat. So I think a few people have this question. As a small solo guy, how can I stand out and get more leads from the bigger companies in my area?
I don't know if that's a residential or a commercial question, and I'll just ask everybody, as you put your questions in, just state like the work mix that you're referring to. It just helps me answer a lot better. But I'm going to assume, because you said a smaller operator, that it's residential. So I'm going to answer with a residential twist. Generally speaking, as a small residential contractor, I think it's actually pretty easy to put yourself in front of your competitors. Now, the reason that I believe this is, in your local market, there's probably 1 or 2 obvious market leaders. Normally, when I look at the market leader in any area, when I look at their website, they're not that good. You can create a better website if you invest in your website. Better messaging, much better value proposition, speak to the pain points and the needs of your customers better. And that website experience can actually really shift the tides very quickly. If they land on your website and it's better than the market leader, they still think you're better. And so I can't say enough about investing in your Instagram and Facebook accounts with professional pictures and very good storytelling, and then a really solid website. Then, if you really want to kind of hack the system, get a really good direct mail piece and actually make sure that that lands on the doorstep of your ICP or your ideal customer profile. So you can go into a direct mail service and you can note that you want all of your direct mail to be sent to very specific neighborhoods. And you can go ahead and choose those neighborhoods, and choosing homes that are $800,000 and up, or $1 million and up, or maybe it's $3 million and up if you've really moved up market. But actually having your direct mail continuously dropping on those doorsteps with meaningful offers, with really well thought out brochures, ad copy that speaks to their actual pain points and their needs, it really gives you this opportunity. But again, it's outbounding. We have to do something that gets us in front of our competitors. Direct mail really works well in residential. Job site signs, using your trailers as billboards, doing a neighborhood door knocking when you're working on the street. Talk to the neighbors, let them know you're on the street, apologize for any disruption, give them some coupons for doing business with you in the future, or give them free car washes if you're working next door and the work's a bit dusty and dirty. Do things that get you opportunity and get you connected directly with other people. And I think that's how you actually win as a smaller company. Bigger companies, they get busy. They're not as personal. They're not taking the time to actually do that type of outreach. And I think when you do that and you do it really well, you actually build trust with the people in a different way. And I think we all know that we like to do business with people that are right in front of us and people that we trust. And so just being out there and increasing your presence can make all the difference as a smaller contractor. And again, what you're trying to do is build 3 to 5 really good relationships with the type of partners that are going to bring you more and more of the type of business that you're doing.
The good news too, Mark, to chime in, that with inflation and technology and where we are at right now as an economy, the cost of a website and the cost of good branding, good social has been very deflationary over the last 10 years. It's much, much, much more accessible for small businesses today than it was 10 years ago. So it's a really great answer, and we're at a good time to capitalize on it. A question from Robert. It's a question about like being really transparent so we can raise the wage, but also maybe not letting the low guy on the totem pole feel like he's the low guy on the totem pole. So I'll just read it again. Do you have a recommendation to measure without informing our lowest paid apprentice that they are at the bottom?
I'm just going to go to the whiteboard for this one. I think I've got it. It makes sense to me. Okay, so if you want to pay your staff $55 an hour, you've probably heard me say this before. I like to begin with the end in mind. So this is nothing more than that, right? This is our goal. And I think, what we have to now say is, in order for this to be true, what has to happen? And so in order to pay our staff $55 an hour, if I have a 25% labor ratio, which is pretty standard in the industry, this is my field labor. So 25% of all revenue goes to pay my field labor. So if it's 25% and I want to pay my field 25%, I have to multiply that rate times 4 to get to 100%. And so in this case, if I go 4 times 55, it's $220. So what has to be true is I need revenue of $220 per hour. Now, how do I do that in my landscape company? This was really a big transition for me in my own business, trying to find a way where I could pay people a living wage. And $55 an hour is just a living wage this day and age in just about every city in North America. Why? Because, by the time we pay tax, pay for a mortgage, pay for cars, pay for our groceries, our kids' sports, some vacations, the money's gone. We know that. $55 an hour this day and age, if you're working a full year, is about $100,000. Out of that 100,000, we've got benefits, we've got pension, we've got taxes. Yeah, we're not talking about somebody taking $100,000 home. If they're lucky, they're probably still only left with $60,000 to actually spend on their lifestyle. So we really do need to find a way as an industry to get everybody to this level. So what are we going to do to get to $220 an hour? We're going to have to do some things in the business that get us there. Now, in order to make that a reality, if today we're actually paying top rate of $32, and if revenue per hour right now in the business is $120, we have to figure out where we're going to actually grow the revenue. So growing revenue like this happens from it's what we sell, number one. Number two is how we perform. And number three, it's what we charge. Now, that all sounds pretty simple. 3 things: what we sell, how we perform the work, and what we charge dictates whether or not we actually get to that revenue per hour. Now, in landscape maintenance, it's very hard to get revenue per hour into the $200 range. But with enhancements, it's actually very possible. With design build, it's definitely possible. You can actually easily get to $300 if you're selling luxury products to luxury homeowners. And one key thing that I always like to remind people: find customers who can afford what you're selling and sell them expensive things. It makes it much easier. That's just the way it is. If you want to find wealth in this world, in any business, find people who have money with a problem and solve that problem. They're willing to pay more to have their problem solved than people without any money. So first off, we have to focus on ideal customers who can afford to pay us higher rates for our work. So we find people who have a problem that needs to be solved, and then we solve it better than everybody else by training our staff to do the work with safety, quality, and efficiency in mind. And we charge a fair price for that service, and we earn a better profit than our competitors because they're slower, less efficient, and not trained as well, and they're not as good at selling because they don't have as good of a brand. And so we really have to do a lot of things to make this possible. So what we sell and who we sell it to is kind of a category, right? And so I want to find work that I know can be sold at $220 per hour. And so I create rules of engagement, and I say, from now on, we're only actually going to put prices out on project work that exceeds $220 per hour. So no more bidding jobs that only bring in $120 per hour. Now, this is scary. Most business owners, when I first say this, say, oh God, I can't do that. But the truth is what you do today dictates what you have tomorrow. And if you keep doing $120 per hour work, then you have a $120 per hour business with low paid staff. If you stop doing that work, then it forces you to create the time to actually find work that serves your goal. So we have to create rules of engagement. Now you have to be able to identify what that work looks like. So what jobs serve $220 per hour? High revenue per hour jobs usually have outdoor kitchens, outdoor appliances, outdoor lighting, expensive hardscape materials, lots of planting. In the maintenance business, it's usually mulching, more seasonal color, more enhancements, more property improvements mixed into the work. It could be adding organic lawn care to your weekly maintenance program. It could be automating the mulching program right into your weekly programs. Whatever that happens to be, what we're trying to do is sell higher revenue per hour work, which means we're putting more material in the ground per hour, which is driving the price up. So it could also be we're selling to customers that have better access so that we can use machines. When we have machines, we're producing more revenue per hour than when we're pushing wheelbarrows. You know, we can install a couple of yards of mulch per hour by hand, or we can put in 10 or 20 with a machine. And so again, machine access, the type of customers, bigger estate properties tend to produce much higher revenue per hour because we're putting dump truck loads of soil and mulch and rocks in every day rather than little tiny pickup truck loads with wheelbarrows. And so we put a lot more revenue per hour in the ground. How we perform the work, this is training. Did we actually take the time to train our staff to become experts at doing the work with safety, quality, and efficiency in mind? Now, most companies, when you really ask this question, and if there's a larger group, usually look at each other and very quickly say, we aren't really doing as much training as we should. And so I'll always challenge people. You have to practice to win. If you're just going to go out on the sports field each week as a sports team and play the game and not practice in between, you're going to lose week in, week out, week in, week out, because the other team is practicing and training and getting better on the weekdays and showing up on the weekends to display their skills. Now, in business, it's no different. It doesn't matter what business, but even more so in landscape. If we don't train our staff to win, if they don't know how to win, if they don't know what the score looks like, if we're not keeping score, if they don't understand production rates, if they haven't been trained to read blueprints or to understand plants or to understand hardscapes or to understand machines, whatever their area of expertise is, then they're likely to show up each day and do their best. But if they don't know what the good looks like in terms of production rates, profits, if they don't have any benchmarks or measures, then they show up without the same intensity as they would otherwise. And so we want to make sure that we're training people on what efficiency looks like, how to do the work at a high quality standard, and then, of course, always starting with safety. And then last, what we charge. Our pricing system really does dictate our likelihood to win. Most companies don't have a great pricing system, and they don't really take the time to optimize profitability when they're selling the work throughout the year. And what I mean by that is early in the spring, there's always more customers than there are days to get the work done. So when the calls are coming in right in the heat of the spring, we should probably be trying to book those out a little further into the year. And we should be taking every lead possible and pricing the work as high as possible with confidence during the spring, knowing that provided they meet our ICP and provided we can sell them high revenue per hour work, we should be working those leads and working them as far into the future as possible so that we book out the fall with high profit margins before we actually start to book out the summer. And the reason we want to do that is we want to tap into the abundant mindset and know that when lots of leads are coming into the business in our busy season, we're pricing with abundance. We've got the confidence to charge higher profits. So let's book as far out into the future as possible and then kind of work backwards from there. I'm a big fan of kind of booking as much into the future as possible at really, really high profit margins, and then backfilling from there and filling in the holes, because there's always somebody calling who wants something done at the last minute, and they're usually willing to pay a premium for having us show up like that. And so when I sell in my business season, when I sell for the future, then I leave more time for filling things in the moment at high rates. And so again, this what we charge really matters. Knowing how to price, knowing how to put overhead recovery on accurately, that's what the LMN estimating software was built for. But then also being able to flex our profitability and know exactly what that profitability is so that we're never bidding with less than 15% net. And ideally, we're often bidding at 25% net throughout the year so that when we shake it all out, we've got really high revenue per hour, really high profits, and much, much higher wages than everybody else in the industry.
Wonderful. Thank you. A question from Mohammed. This is about operations manager. When hiring an operations manager, what are the top key factors to put in place to set him up or her up for success to help me scale to 3 million? We don't have context again on this one. Mark, I asked him to follow up. I haven't had an answer. So let's just go ahead and fill in the blanks. But this sounds like a question about maybe like the selection process and then early onboarding stuff for an operations manager for a business trying to get to 3 mil.
Yeah, really good question. So first off, we always have to think about the scale we're at. And so the fact that you shared that you're trying to get to 3 million tells me a few things. Number one, when we're trying to get to 1 million, the owner is typically doing everything. They're doing the sales, they're doing operations, they're often the mechanic, they're the hands-on installer, they're the customer service rep. They're kind of doing everything. They're just running the business. And they're creating simple systems and trying to build people that can do some of this work when they're not around. And so getting to 1 million is not easy. Now, the faster you get there in transition to 3 million, the easier it becomes. The main reason is we get the opportunity to be able to afford to hire people to shoulder some of these key areas. Now, those key areas are typically sales. Somebody might start selling operations, like this situation we're talking about. Someone's going to help us run the operation. And then there's usually somebody helping run finance, or there should be. I usually actually say start by hiring somebody to run finance, either outsource it with a fractional CFO and bookkeeper, or bring somebody on internal. Usually you can afford that once you're in around 1 million. Now, the sales piece, typically the owner hangs on to sales a little bit longer. And so step 2 is usually the operations manager. I'll go to the whiteboard here for a minute and I'll just make a few notes of things that I would really be looking for this ops manager to do when getting from $1 to $3 million. So again, beginning with the end in mind, I want to think about what do I really want the ops manager to do? Now, I'm going to say that I've got install department, and a maintenance department, just to keep things really simple here. Now, if I've got the operations manager running both departments, first, what I want to do is I want to be really clear about how much revenue I plan to get from each area. So if I've got 2 million planned in install and I want to get 1 million planned over here in maintenance, this ops manager actually has a $3 million responsibility. Their job is to run $3 million of revenue at the forecasted gross profit and revenue per hour in these two departments. Now, I want them to have somebody to help own these things. So who in install will own the two? Maybe I've got 3 crews down below, each with a crew leader, crew 1, crew 2, crew 3. And maybe over in maintenance, I've actually got a manager who then runs 4 crews. So now what I like to do when I'm building out org chart is I like to think about cascading revenue, and I get everybody on the team below them to understand their revenue. So if I've got this install crew, maybe this one's 700, maybe this one's 800, maybe this one's 500. Over here, maybe I've got a 300K crew, a 250, another 250, and a $200,000 crew. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the revenue right from the top and I'm cascading that all the way down. The key metrics that this person's going to run to are going to be gross profit. I'm going to tell them very clearly that I want 40% or whatever your number happens to be on your budget. I'm going to say maintenance and design build revenue per hour. Maintenance might be 110 and design build might be 225. So now they've got some key metrics. Number one, I need you to hit the revenue, I need you to hit the gross profit, and I need to hit these ratios. Now, the key thing that they're going to be focused on every day in order to make this happen is estimated versus actual hours. That ops manager has to be hyper fixated on managing the estimated versus actual hours, because that is the tip of the spear. That is literally the leading indicator for profitability. So when our estimators are putting out estimates, I want my ops manager to bless the bids. So that's going to be something that I really want them involved in. Then what I want them to be hyper aware of is all of these metrics, which are a byproduct of job costing. So what I'm going to say to my ops manager is I want you heavily involved in the estimating process, heavily involved in the job costing process, and then very involved in the day-to-day management of these crews to make sure that we're eliminating the waste so that these opportunities become a reality. So what this operations manager is actually fixated on are these key metrics. The last is efficiency rate. In LMN, we call that crew score. So what I want to do is I want to give them some really clear metrics. I want you to hit this revenue target of 3 million. I want 40% gross profit. I want my maintenance revenue per hour to average 110. I want my design build to average 225. I need you to make sure that estimated versus actual hours stay on track where possible. And when they don't, I need you to go in and understand, do we need to train or motivate the crew differently, or do we need to change pricing? And when the ops manager understands these metrics and they know that they're very tied to our estimating process, and they're very tied to job costing, and then they're very tied to field operations, they're going to control the outcome because they have the data and they have the opportunity to actually manage each department with clear targets in mind. Now, again, if you're asking somebody to come into your business and become the ops manager, and you don't start by really sharing this level of information and setting reasonable targets, they have nothing to measure themselves to. And I feel like they get lost very, very quickly. In addition, what I'd strongly recommend is that you provide them with a framework in which to actually manage their day-to-day, which again is the LeanScaper operating system.
We have a question from Ryan. And by the way, folks, we have like 13 open questions still. I just want to flag this. Like if we don't have time to get to it here in the live session, as we often don't, because there's more questions than we have time for it, we will get to these in the community. So rest assured, this will all be addressed, even if we run out the clock and don't get to yours. Question from Ryan. We are a maintenance / enhancement company, and we're trying to grow into a new area about 1.5 to 2 hours away from our current location. We have about 2.5 to 3 days of work in the new area. Would you use subs until we can grow and have a full-time crew in the new area, or have a crew drive from one location to the other 1 to 2 days a week? The price obviously includes lots of unproductive time. That's the question from Ryan.
So I would never use subs. I just don't think that you get the quality from subs, particularly for landscape maintenance. So I would definitely allow for the extra time for the crew to make the commute temporarily, knowing that we're investing in the future. So we're going to operate at a little bit lower gross profit margin for a fixed period of time, whether that be a full season or a half season or a full year in many cases. But we're doing this knowing that we're building for the future. And then what I would do is I would put a lot more emphasis on outbound selling during the off season and during the prime selling seasons in that market. And so more outbound selling that would involve, if you're doing commercial landscape maintenance, that would be a lot more outbounding and cold calling. I might even consider using a third-party BDR service to do outbound phone calls to book sales meetings so that we can grow the business a little faster. I'd be getting on the streets that we currently have business and quoting every other business on the street or every other home on the street, depending where that is. So again, we're really focusing on route densification. We're trying to get into the neighborhoods that we want to be in, and we're actually being proactive, and we're putting a quote on the doorstep of every house or business in that market. When you go at that very aggressively and you set aside a budget to do that, you could move into just about any neighborhood and book a crew out really quickly. Again, it's an investment, so I would earmark more money for sales and marketing so that that happens faster, rather than being slow about the growth and paying for somebody to commute any longer than I'd need to. So super heavy investment in a sales and marketing strategy that gets us our first crew booked out really quickly, and then allows us to keep replicating that and scaling up to the point where we can afford to pay for a local presence.
So no subs, but you treat the loss in margin as kind of the cost of doing business and investment in the future, and that's the philosophy on scaling through geography. Awesome. This is from an anonymous attendee. I don't know why. I wish I knew his name, because this is a great question. When you reach a point where you have more clients and relationships than the company's present capacity to fulfill, streamlining and scaling becomes the obvious route. Because my team is so small, though, things can seem informal. This is a two-part question. How can you foster a cordial yet professional atmosphere, even though the team is under 10 people? Our work is mostly residential and commercial projects on occasion. And the second part of the question is, how do I create and maintain a professional standard when hiring, even though the people I'm hiring might be older or more skilled, or in many cases more experienced than me, and they might see the company as less professional because it's not at that corporate level yet? So that's a long question, but I thought it was a thoughtful one, and I wonder if you can answer both, Mark.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And I think many of us, came up this way. I, started my business part-time when I was in high school, and then it evolved, in my early 20s when I decided to leave my nuclear apprenticeship and career behind. I felt the same pain. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know yet. You're growing the business. You don't have all the business skills. You don't have all of the financial skills or the depth to invest as quickly as you'd like to make the company as professional as you'd like to have it, and maybe your employees would like as well. But I think when you are approaching growth like this, it's important to be a little bit vulnerable and to be honest with people that you're hiring and interviewing and letting them know where you're at and where you're going. And I think this is really important for smaller businesses and younger entrepreneurs to just simply say, here's where we're at today, and here's where we're going to be 5 years from now. I'm trying to hire growth minded people with the experience that I don't have to help me get there. And hiring your mentors is, I think, a pretty incredible opportunity that maybe only entrepreneurs get, but you've got to actually be vulnerable enough to let them know that you're hiring them because they have skills and know-how and experience that you don't, and that you want to leverage that to grow yourself, but also grow everybody in the company. And one of the big sort of frameworks that I use for this is the org chart planning, because I think most people are a little apprehensive about hiring leaders to help them lead the company because they really don't know how to attract those leaders, and they feel almost nervous being the leader, not having all the answers. But in my experience, the more I surround myself with the right people and the more vulnerable I am, the faster I learn and the faster we scale. And so I think learning how to put an org chart together, learning how to put out job ads that attract these people, and then being vulnerable enough to actually learn from them while holding them accountable to an onboarding program, a 30, 60, 90-day plan when they first hire, with clear measurables, with clear direction, with clear goals that can be created very easily when you're following the LeanScaper operating system. We help you create goals for every role in the business so that you can hire great people and step out of the way and know whether or not they're on track using key metrics that we provide in the balanced scorecard. So the organizational design is really the secret there.
It's a really great answer, Mark. Thank you. I think we have time for one more, so we'll try and squeeze this one in. And I've chosen this one because I hear it a lot at events and conferences. I feel like many people are challenged by this. It's from Steven. He says, what's a good way to sell design work? It seems a lot of people are turned off when we tell them we charge for designs. Do you have any advice for making designs a more sellable item?
I'll answer this, and sometimes my answer comes off harsh, so please don't take this personally. Most people who have a hard time selling design have a hard time selling design because they don't have a good enough portfolio to sell it. If you've got an incredible design portfolio and that's loud and proud and out front on your website, if you're showing up to meetings with a really well built out portfolio that shows the complexity of your designs, the quality of the projects, the level of detail that you go to in your designs, with sections of foundations, construction details, hardware details on how things mount and what the finishes are going to look like, very descriptive drawings, visual drawings with 3Ds of the finished product so that people can visualize what the work's going to look like. If you've got that level of design, people don't mind paying for it. But when you show up empty-handed, or when you show up with a very basic design, people are apprehensive to pay for that. In my experience, I would very much lead with design. I wouldn't lead with price. I wouldn't lead with timing. I would just lead with design. I would sell the fact that we sell art. And in order for us to actually deliver, we have to be able to spend a good amount of time on the design, working on something that looks, acts, and will function the way they're expecting. And that requires a good amount of time. We have to think through the artistic approach. We have to think through the technical approach. We have to think of drainage, sunlight. We have to think of plant health. We have to think of scale and size for entertainment areas. We have to think of function of lighting and irrigation and the building materials and the frost and the heat and the sun. And we've got to bring all of this together in a design that's going to create an outdoor living experience that changes people's lives. And so when you get really good at explaining that and showing people what design actually looks like, and if your design is a lot better and your project portfolio is a lot better, then they understand why they pay for it. The easiest way that I explain this is it's no different than when people go car shopping. They go car shopping for a budget car at Volkswagen. They go shopping for a luxury car at Porsche. The reason they go through the doors of those two different dealers with different intent is the way that the brand actually presents itself. Porsche is a luxury brand, and they charge for design and the best materials and the best end product. Volkswagen is about reliability. Still beautiful cars, very comfortable, very reliable, but they're not selling to the creme de la creme. They're selling to the average person, and they're selling safety and quality and efficiency. And they know that that brand meets that criteria. So if you want to sell design, you have to become a luxury brand. And if your look and feel isn't quite there yet, then you just haven't earned the right to charge design. I used to charge 5% of the project budget for design, which typically I was selling $300,000 to $500,000 jobs and up. So it wasn't uncommon for me to let them know that design was going to be $15,000 to $25,000 for a residential project. But when they'd see a 40-page flip chart of drawings with all of the designs and details and permits and engineer stamps, they understood that they had to pay for that. But I would always warn them that you just can't build a masterpiece without a plan, because when I'm not there, other people wouldn't know what to build, and I can't be everywhere at once. And so you being able to explain that design is really setting the standard for quality work and for an artistic outcome that actually serves all of their needs, then they start to understand that there's value there, and they see that there's return on that investment. But I'll tell you, it's not hard to sell design if your portfolio is ready and if you've got some design to sell.
I love it. We are at time just about. Christian is going to share screen for us. And if you have not joined the LeanScaper community online, there's a QR code that you can scan to do that right now. It'll take under a minute to join. We've got individual groups for every role on your team. There's resources in there already, north of 100. We're adding more every week. There's going to be content disseminated in there. If you're not in there yet, it is the place to be and will be for the foreseeable future. So we are at time. As I said earlier, if we didn't get to your question in the live Q&A, we will get to it in the community. We're doing another one of these next week. So we'll see you then. And thank you everyone for coming.
All right. Thanks everybody. We'll see you next week.